about that?
We all love watching our favourite heroes taking down the bad guys for mass appeal, but has it ever occurred to you that some heroes may not even like each other? Yeah, the real world is tough out there, and sometimes even the good guys figure they've got to fight each other to assert dominance and gain bragging rights. So, on that note, the TV Regent has something special in place for you today with my top 25 hero versus hero fight scenes in the movies.
Oh, are you?
Movie branding is a really funny concept, you know. Usually you include your products in a film to make sure the characters say good things about it.
This isn't a car. This is a Honda Odyssey.
But normal logic doesn't apply when you're dealing with the likes of Deadpool. The way he shamelessly ripped apart the Honda Odyssey with his savagery made you wonder why the company even bothered to allow their car to be used. But then we get the epic fight against Wolverine and it all finally made sense to us. The choreography of this battle had to be top-notch because you've got two extremely powerful mutants going at each other with rage and they can regenerate at will. So it's not like there's going to be a clear victor for a while. The camera angles definitely helped, but even the brutality of this fight really went hard. If these two didn't have their healing powers, it would have been one heck of a violation for the loser, who in this case happened to be Wade Wilson himself, judging from the way he was tied up by Logan towards the end. I also like the gag with the coexist sign being highlighted, while Wolverine was totally shredding the insides of Deadpool's brains. What I can say for sure though, is that the Honda Odyssey is definitely gonna see some sales now. Godzilla and King Kong are the literal embodiment of the term frenemies. They clearly don't seem to like each other, but whenever it's time to team up against a common threat, these two always come through. We saw that first against Mecha Godzilla, and again when they took on Shimo and Scar King, but we also need to appreciate the little battle they had against each other right before one of the most epic team-ups in the history of monster movies. The battle next to the pyramids was intense as well as hilarious, because you could clearly see that Kong didn't want to fight the dude who almost bit his head off the last time they met. In this situation as well, Godzilla wasn't having any of it, and he made his feelings known to Kong with a rather rude hug. Sure, Kong did manage to catch the king of the monsters off guard because of his new arm, but that dominance lasted him all of 10 business seconds. The moment Godzilla started launching his atomic breath, we all knew Kong was cooked. It really is amazing to see how someone like King Kong can be reduced to a simple fool when he's up against a true titan. Luckily for him, Godzilla's questionable girlfriend Mothra came to the rescue just in the nick of time. Tom Hardy is one of the best examples of an alpha male in modern society. The man's played roles that define masculinity, even when his face is hidden from plain sight. Now, if I'm going to be honest with you, I'll admit that I wanted to see more of him in Mad Max Fury Road, because he was supposed to be the main character. However, the movie was good enough to earn its own merit, and the fight scenes between Mad Max and Furiosa were a key highlight from it. Now, if this was just Mad Max on his own, then he probably would have cracked open that bald skull with minimum effort, but he's a good guy, so he just focused on freeing himself. Sadly for him, Furiosa didn't feel the same way, and on top of that, she had a whole gang of girls pulling on his chain to give her an undue advantage. What I liked most about this scene was that Max was never really on the attack. He was frantically defending himself from Furiosa's relentless assault, which makes it a unique fight scene. I also love the little moment on Furiosa's face when Max fires 3 warning shots instead of just blowing her head off. You can practically see the wheels turning in her head when she realizes that this guy is still human enough to be reasoned with for sparing her life, even when she wouldn't have done the same for him literally 5 seconds earlier.
Come on, stop trying to hit me and hit me.
When a hero fights another hero, it's not always because they hate each other, but because they want to help each other out. That's exactly what happens here when Morpheus trains Neo in the art of breathless fighting in the Matrix. It's a pretty standard fight scene at first, with Neo getting his butt handed to him, but then the tables turn the moment Morpheus explains the reality of fighting inside a computer system. Bro tried to pull off the fanciest jump attack against Morpheus, but got violated a literal second later. I love how Neo's heavy breathing stops the moment Morpheus reminds him that there's literally no air to breathe.
Free your mind.
Once Neo's brain accepts that, his fatigue vanishes almost instantly, and that's when Bro turned into John Wick. Oh wait, there's still some time for that franchise to come in, isn't there? Anyway, the fight sequence was really impressive, and you could tell that Keanu Reeves really put in an effort to get it right. Plus, it was a nice touch to have everyone rush to see the fight because of the simple fact that the Chosen One was fighting their boss.
I don't believe it. I know what you're trying to do.
The fight between Hector and Achilles was a rather tragic one because it was essentially a battle between men who were simply doing what was right for their respective sides. There's no villain as such in the whole scenario, although I have to admit that Hector did take the life of Achilles' best friend. That's what makes this battle so iconic, especially with some of the lines that Achilles delivers.
You gave him the honor of your sword. You won't have eyes tonight. You won't have ears or a tongue.
The part about lions and men, or the part where he taunted Hector while telling him to get up, were indicative of how dominant Achilles was as a personality and a fighter. He obviously wins the fight without sustaining damage, but I will give it to Hector for being able to put up an impressive display. But yeah, Hector is pretty much the tragic hero of this story. If his father had listened to his son's advice instead of relying on the gods for everything, it might not have come to this. I don't think anyone would have expected to see this fight on a TV Regent list, but hey, it has two heroes going at each other for a ridiculous amount of time, so it qualifies. Now, I'm not going to talk about the ridiculous exaggerations of the fight between Ram and Bheem, but it was definitely a grand display which put two best friends against each other due to the political situations they were presented with. You can't blame either Bheem or Ram for trying to do their best here, so all I can say is that we got a good fight scene out of it. And yeah, with all those CGI tigers in the background, the whole sequence definitely felt more epic.
You have no weapon.
Leave it to Jack Sparrow to make a scene so intense and funny at the same time. His sword fight against Will Turner was a brilliant display of swordsmanship, and the choreography was on point for the entirety of the sequence. However, I think the real victories Johnny Depp landed on Orlando Bloom were through his words. Whether he was mocking Will for not spending enough time with women or even questioning his manhood, Jack Sparrow was a menace throughout this scene, and it laid the foundation towards making him one of the most memorable characters of all time. It was also kind of sad that the fight had to end because of third-party interference. I really wanted to see how the whole gunpoint thing would have worked out.
Or perhaps the reason you practice 3 hours a day is that you already found one and are otherwise incapable of wooing said strumpers.
I'm right here.
The Rock may be known for all his antics as a wrestler, but the real Royal Rumble came when Hobbs took on Dominic Toretto in the 5th installment of what now seems to be an immortal franchise. Of course, Vin Diesel is the undisputed lead of the Fast and Furious brand, so he came out on top in this battle. However, the blows he traded with Dwayne Johnson in this scene had all of us on the edge of our seats. The layman may just term this as two bold men venting out on each other, but the sheer intensity on display was something else. It was the most amount of acting we got to see from Vin Diesel after a long time, and even The Rock made a great impression during his first proper outing as Hobbs. They sure made it extra dramatic with the walls breaking and the final attack landing on the floor instead of Hobbs' head. So I guess this is why the series has been able to sustain itself for so long. Yeah, this one's a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Some may even call it the Titanic for men, but you know, with brothers who aren't from Alabama. I've actually covered some of Tom Hardy's scene from Warrior before, but the final match against his brother Brandon was definitely something else. Of course, the fight was freaking epic, but we also got to see the brothers finally bonding with each other towards the end rather than just trying to break each other's bones. Kudos to Tom Hardy once again for bringing such a raw feel to Tommy. I also want to point out how Tommy tapped out only when Brandon told him he loved him. Bro just needed some love from his family to comply. Ain't no battle better than one with two martial arts legends in them. Seeing Jackie Chan and Jet Li facing off against each other in 2008's Forbidden Kingdom was a dream come true for all the young boys out there who aspired to become the ultimate fighter. Liu Yan is generally supposed to be hilarious, which he clearly displays here, but even then, he was a complete match for the silent monk who didn't want his words to do the talking. The intensity of the scene may not match the overall choreography, but make no mistake, you're witnessing a moment that has its own legacy. Man, I really need to start following my New Year's resolutions. Learning martial arts has been on my agenda since 2016.
Praying mantis, very good. For catching bugs, but not tigers.
I am Nemesis Prime. You are nothing.
Optimus Prime may be the most overpowered Autobot out there, but Bumblebee sure put on one heck of a fight against his corrupted leader. This fight scene from the last night was epic beyond anything else we'd seen in the Transformers franchise because it's got an evil Optimus set against a very scenic backdrop. The moves on display probably could have been better from Prime, but Bumblebee made sure to bring out all the big guns to this fight. Bro obviously lost the match, but luckily, his voice was enough to bring his leader back to his senses. That kind of begs the question though, why didn't he just try that in the first place?
I am Bumblebee, your oldest friend. Optimus, I would lay down my life.
Power at 400% capacity.
How about that?
This was such an amazing moment. It's hard for someone to understand how it felt unless they watched it back in the cinema in 2012. The first Avengers flick had tons of highlights.
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
But watching the God of Thunder taking on the God of Sass was a whole other level of entertainment. I mean, you've got Iron Man making fun of Thor's outfit, followed by a visually striking display of powers. The little charge up Tony Stark got from Thor's lightning blast was also a brilliant twist that all the fans thoroughly enjoyed. It's just such a shame that Captain America had to come in and spoil the party. I really want to see how that fight would have ended. I mentioned their brief battle in the latest installment of the Monsterverse, but the real MVP of giant monster battles has got to be the Hong Kong fight between Godzilla and King Kong. I mean, it literally begins with Godzilla atomic blasting a hole all the way through Hollow Earth, just to tell Kong the beast version of, "Come at me, bro." The fight that followed right after was nothing short of spectacular, especially because of all the Neon City vibes in the background. Let's be real here, there was no way Kong was ever going to win this match, but they had to make him look good for the first half, so I'm going to let that slide. The real stuff goes down when Godzilla goes croc mode and reminds the giant gorilla, well, he'll never be able to match the King of the Monsters. Yeah, math may have been our greatest enemy back in school, but when it comes to Peter Parker, it's his greatest savior.
Things has ever happened to me, but don't ever do that again.
Fighting Doctor Strange is a task and a half in itself, so for Spider-Man to come out on top would take nothing short of a miracle. And a miracle it was indeed, because we finally got to see how math can be applied in the real world as well. Of course, the primary highlight of this fight has to do with its visual appeal. but at the end of the day, using the power of school lessons turned out to be the deciding factor. Yeah, I know they really had to put this in favor of Spider-Man, but hey, we got a pretty solid scene out of it, so I'm not complaining. Speaking of plot armor protecting an MCU character to ridiculous extremes, here's the big daddy of all of them. Even if we were to see 14,605 possibilities, I'm sure not even one of them would have freaking Iron Man lose to a bunch of gym bros on super steroids. However, the final battle of Civil War was thrilling to say the least, and we got some amazing shots in the process, so it deserves number 11.
Let's kick his ass.
My personal favourite has got to be when Iron Man blasts the Winter Soldier's metal arm, because it kinda reminded Bucky not to be punching over his weight. Captain America, on the other hand, only won this match because his name was in the film's title.
Do you even remember them?
You are a terrible liar.
Okay, so this might be a rather controversial way to kick off my top 10, but remember that Shaw becomes a goodish guy later on, so he does qualify as a somewhat heroic character in the long run, if you like. Having said that, the fight between Hobbs and Shaw was pretty much the reason why they got their own spin-off movie later on. It was fueled with testosterone and bald men, and once again, The Rock should have easily won this matchup had it not been for Shaw's sneaky tricks. Also, the banter that these two constantly partake in during Hobbs and Shaw was good enough to warrant a separate entry, but I figured I'd show you the action part of their relationship. Before Age of Ultron, I really want to know how much money you'd been willing to bet on the freaking Hulk losing to someone named Veronica. Of course, once you learn that she's the code name for the Hulkbuster, that makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it? Iron Man really outdid himself here in this battle because of how epic the overall display was. You could easily tell these were two brute forces of nature going against each other, and the final result was magnificent. I'd go on to sing more praises about this scene, but I've already covered it dozens of times before, so I'm sure you get the vibe already. The Hulk really can't catch a break, can he? This is the second time he's got violated, and that too in consecutive entries. While the Hulkbuster may have actually beaten him, the Angry Green Giant does come out as the winner of this bout, although that's only because of cheating from the Grand Master. This moment was teased in the trailers, so all of us went in expecting a great sequence, and we weren't disappointed at all. Thor definitely gave it his all, even without the thunder, and made all of us realise how powerful he actually is. Of course, the sudden surge of lightning towards the end made him even more epic, and the God of Thunder would have easily taken the crown here had it not been for Taika Waititi's lack of common sense when it comes to his humour. Well, at least Hulk gets a consolation win here after being bested by Iron Man. Back when I was in the Matrix entry, I was saying that there was still time for the John Wick franchise. Well, that's because the Baba Yaga finds himself at number 7 on this list. And guess who he's up against? Freaking Donnie Yen, aka Ip Man himself. John Wick vs Kane was a hit in the making because you've got the world's most badass assassin taking on the world's best martial arts fighter, even though the both of them are buddies. It's a typical situation that we've seen before, but the respect both the characters show each other throughout the battle is quite laudable. There was a moment where John could have shot down Kane, but he didn't do it because he was never really trying to take his life. Also, the things Kane can do in this movie are pretty much implausible for a blind guy. The way Donnie Yen chose to play him and move throughout these scenes was just so goddamn cool that common logic doesn't really even matter. I really wanted to see how this fight would play out, but then Mr. Nobody had to come in and ruin everything. Superman is the undisputed god of the Justice League, but I guess some people still needed proof of that, so they had to be reminded of the Man of Steel's true capabilities. I'm considering the fight from Zack Snyder's Justice League for this entry because the theatrical release had way too many jokes that just didn't land. Now, the fight between Kal-El and the whole Justice League was pretty much a demonstration of how clueless they are without him. Even with strong fighters such as Aquaman and Wonder Woman, they still couldn't even land a scratch on Clark Kent's perfect face. Yes, I'm aware of the whole CGI moustache debacle, but the Snyder Cut didn't have that abomination on Henry Cavill's face, so he got spared from the memes for once. There's so much going on here that cements Superman's dominance. I've already spoken about his strength, but even the way he countered Flash's speed was epic stuff. And yes, the same Dark Knight who almost ended him in the previous film looked like a timid fruit bat in this scene. No hate though, so don't come at me in the comments. You know, when the first Avengers movie got promoted, all of us Marvel fans were left thinking who the weakest member of the squad was. If we're only considering the live-action films, then it was a tie between Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton. Of course, Black Widow didn't like being underestimated to that degree, so she decided to prove her mettle by taking on Loki's brain slave Hawkeye. Yeah, even though that statement has sounded weird every single time I say that phrase, I ain't gonna change it. Also, it was pretty cool to see Black Widow picking up a W despite being the only female Avenger. The fight sequence was a treat to the eyes, but the only one feeling salty after all of this would have to be Hawkeye. When he hit his head, we could see that the mind control was already stopping. However, that final punch from Natasha wasn't just a simple case of insurance, it also felt personal. While I may debate the eventual outcome of this fight, I'll admit that the scene was a great showcasing of normal fights without having to burst into an endless pool of CGI.
But pressing you harder is gonna break. Kill you, motherfucker!
Yuri Boyka may not have been shown as an angelic hero in this film, but by no means was he a villain either, so I'm going to count him as an anti-hero here, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The first battle between Boyka and Chambers was obviously rigged due to the spiked water, but our man Yuri made sure to fight his opponent fairly, so he does qualify for heroic attributes. Having said that, the final battle was nothing short of brutal, and it made you wonder if these two guys were actually going to end each other in the process. I mean, just look at the speed of those attacks. I probably wouldn't even be able to soil my pants that quickly.
Stop! Round's over!
The action choreography was top-notch stuff, and I love the way the fighters would react to their blows, almost as if they didn't get hurt, but knew it would only get worse if the attacks continued. See, this is how you film martial artists on the level of Michael Jai White and Scott Adkins. There's no fancy editing or flash cuts, it's just a simple case of letting your awesomeness soar. That final crack though really must have hurt like a beast. Oh yeah, I did mention this film right at the start of the list, but I already knew that the first battle between Deadpool and Wolverine just had to find its way into my top 3. The car scene was cool and all, but the battle inside the Void was a moment we'd been dreaming of since the naughty assassin finally made his truthful debut in 2016. The anger in Wolverine's face was reminiscent of his OG form as well. And the director made sure this was going to be a high-octane moment right from the get-go. Like, we got Logan charging at Wade Wilson like a literal animal, then we had some shooting and slashing at each other, making their regeneration skills work overtime as well. It's such a comedic and exciting sequence to watch, so it proves that the multiverse was never a problem for Disney. It was just the boring stories they were putting together. Oh yeah, and I just have to shout out the epic, not so subtle jokes they decided to push here, especially the Fallen Fox logo. At least these studio execs allow themselves to be made fun of, right? I may have violated Bruce Wayne in the Justice League entry, but this scene's placement proves the TV Regent's loyalty. Batman and Superman are the most popular heroes from the DC universe, and they'll continue to be that way no matter what. So to witness their rivalry translate into a deadly battle was definitely a highlight from 2016. The film may not have been able to completely live up to its hype, but it did bring in over $800 million globally, and a huge chunk of that dough came from the desire to watch Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent go at each other in a no-holds-barred contest. Well, technically speaking, Kal-El did go extremely soft on the Dark Knight in the beginning, otherwise there wouldn't have been an entry here to cover, to be honest. However, Batman and his supply of kryptonite sure got the job done until a certain Martha ruined Bruce Wayne's moment. The fight itself was spectacular, with the tide constantly turning between the two stalwarts until the plot decided to finally move further. Also, I know Batman survives primarily through his prep time skills, but even then, the way he actually got Superman to bleed will never not be iconic. You know, with all the previous mentions of superheroes going at each other, I think it's safe to say that the airport battle scene from Civil War is the great granddaddy of all hero versus hero battles. After all, this isn't just one dude going up against another, we've got a whole full-on army clash here, and that too with new characters like Black Panther and Spider-Man showing us their moves. It's such a great sequence because it keeps us busy despite the lengthy runtime, but then again, how on earth will you ever get bored by such a display? There's Spider-Man taking on both Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there's Ant-Man turning into a freaking giant, and all other kinds of action going on between Iron Man's squad and Captain America's rebels. Also, I just realized that the top two entries today came from the biggest rivals in 2016, although the box office numbers clearly indicated a dominant winner. It's sequences like these that make you really miss the Infinity Saga MCU. This definitely felt like an Avengers Assemble moment, but the main difference was that the Avengers were actually fighting each other. And come to think of it, this may have set the blueprint for the eventual mega battle of Endgame as well. The accuracy of that statement doesn't matter though, because this scene is undoubtedly numero uno for today's video.
You got hard, kid. Where you from?
Queens?
Brooklyn.
Hope you liked the video, please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video I know you're going to enjoy.